So I'm up to operating temperature. I've been cruising around the hills just a little bit, and you can see I'm a little ways from home. We've got a new horse in the stable. This is a 1997 Arctic Cat, and it's the Bearcat. This was the big bad boy, four-wheel drive, 454. That's what they called it. So this one, aside from being in really good shape, I got really cheap because it would die. You get going and it'd just die, it wouldn't start. So when I picked it up, turned the key, and there was nothing. You can see it has a neutral light now, but it's got a forward reverse switch. It's like a neutral safety switch. So when you pull it back, it says reverse. When you put it forward, it says neutral. But it had been slammed into forward so many times that this arm here was bent. And because it was bent, I wasn't getting neutral, so there was no assist for the start. The start button was just totally dead. I mean, it was just, you could just hammer that thing as much as you wanted, and you got nothing. So what I did, long story short, probed the solenoid back here and got it to start. And I thought, well, that's great, it can start. And then I eventually figured out the thing with the switch and the neutral. So anyway, I get going up the street, and whenever I'd go high RPMs, I could get about this much throttle. I get out there and it just smokes like crazy when you put more than just a little throttle. You know, I'd get up into third or fourth gear with just a little throttle going up the hill, and then when I'd give it more, it would just die, you know, just like it was flooding. And at the same time, it'd be shooting out white smoke, blue smoke, and everything on the spectrum. The other thing that I ran into is I couldn't get it to go into gear. You see it's in neutral, and then when you'd step on the back part of it to upshift, it wouldn't do anything, and the neutral light was never on, so I didn't really see what was going on. But you push it really hard like you're trying to brake it, then you get first, second, third, and the rest of the gears go easy. So I went from thinking the transmission shot, the starter doesn't work, there's something blown, checking all the fuses, you know, what's the big deal? There's a 30 amp fuse back up on here. You can see the little green through the cover there. 30 amp fuses are green if you didn't know. So I'm like, what in the world is going on with this thing? You know, why is it dumping so much smoke? I thought that what was happening, you see the spark plug here was just horribly fouled in there. I used a torch and cleaned it off, burned all the crud off. You can see the ignition coil up through there. It looks like it says Mitsubishi on it. I'm not sure. Anyway, so with this little guy, I checked for an ignition leak because I thought that it was having a control module or some kind of problem where it was having an ignition leak or ignition failure. Wasn't sure if it was temperature related, or, you know, I know it was related to RPM, but was the RPMs creating a higher pressure, higher voltage, and just, you know, leaking out, or what was the deal? I thought another theory that I had was that the ignition control module was getting hot and dying. So I tried going out cold and just really romping on it, and it'd still smoke and die. So I thought the smoke was unburned fuel going out through the tailpipe, but it seemed a lot like it was oil. It smelled like oil burning. Another key indicator is that I came back from a ride, and there's a bunch of oil leaking on the ground. And you look at the bottom of this is with an air filter box right here. When you look at the bottom of it, it's got this little flapper valve, and it's just covered in oil. So I'm like, oh, we got a bunch of oil in the air box. So I got into here in the air filter. You pull the air filter off, and there's just oil everywhere. I wonder if it's a PCV system. I once had a Yamaha that I was testing for somebody. It was just puking oil through the air box and sucking it back in. But you can see this one, it's coming in, you know, just all over. So a bad PCV system will do it. And also, like on that Yamaha 426, it was a dirt bike, two-wheeler, it was just way overfilled with oil. So on this one, you go to check the oil through the little sight glass right there, and you can't see the line anywhere because it's just way too full. So somebody did an oil change on this. You can see it's got an aftermarket Fram oil filter on it, but somebody changed the oil and they just way overfilled it. It's easy for me to think that because I know that this vehicle is used by teenagers, and I think that maybe they were doing the maintenance too and overfilled it. But it could also be something like coolant or oil that was being added to the system inadvertently through a head gasket leak or a bad carb. So we're going to drain some oil off. That's what the drain pan's there for. I got this thing bent, so now when I turn the key on, I can gotta give it some gas. And it doesn't want to go. Spark plug's getting pretty fouled, but watch what happens. Watch this. So the PCV, where the oil's coming in from, is on the side here. In fact, we'll just pull out this because we're not going to get any dust or dirt in there at the moment. Let's see if we can get it to puke out some oil. See it sucking the oil in. It's hard to breathe smoke when you're a human, but it's hard to breathe smoke when you're a machine too. You see this hose right here that goes into the top of the motor right there. It goes up and around and back to here. We're getting a bunch of oil pumping in through that hose. So if you have a bad PCV valve or something on a car, you can have the same thing happen. So watch this. We're pretty clean across the top here, but watch what happens. Puke all over everything, it starts dumping oil right into the intake. So you got this stream of oil that goes in, it's like it's flooding it or something. Isn't that amazing? And then that oil's pouring back through, it's dripping out through the bottom of the air filter, and then you see it come in the box down below. Just got too much oil, it's too full. Want to see something else fun? So this has got a little trap built into it. You can see it goes down a little bit longer on this front side. My finger's pretty clean, but when I stick it down in there, in that reservoir, it's just full of oil. You see I'm just dripping everywhere, dripping into the pan. It's just a mess. So we're gonna have to find a way to get that oil to drain off. There should be that little burp valve or whatever down there, and we'll get that off. Once we drain the oil down and we don't have oil being injected into our intake, I bet this thing's just going to run a whole lot better. It's going to make all the difference in the world. So there was a whole bunch of dirt in there. I had to get in there with some 90-degree pliers and pluck it out, but there's an easy way to drain that thing. I'm kind of stumped because I drained everything out. When I first started to drain, I drained, you can see where the light's coming from. That's the bottom of the engine, that's the oil pan. So, and that's where the manual says to drain it from, but when I open it, something came out in the consistency of antifreeze. I mean, you smear it on the garage floor, it smeared like antifreeze, but didn't look quite right. It's kind of milky. I thought, well, this is a head gasket. I smell it. It smells kind of like fuel, but it's super runny like it's synthetic oil. I checked to see if it was coolant. I pull off the radiator cap, and when I look inside, now bear in mind I just drained that, and so if it was that much antifreeze that came out, and it never got thick. The thickest oil I found was in the air box. So I take this off, you can see the radiator's still full of coolant. So it's not a head gasket. So was it full of synthetic oil, or how did fuel get in with the oil? That's the other thing. If you have it flood real bad several times, if you have a stuck needle and seat, they're stuck open, it could do that, but it should flood bad enough to where it won't start either. It's a weird one. We'll figure it out. Like I say, in the middle drain plug, it came out like water. I thought it was coolant at first. I thought it was really milky looking, but it smelled a little bit like gasoline. And when I checked the coolant, like I say, it's coolant. So I'm going to go ahead and put some more oil in it and just see where we're at. So I've put in 3 quarts. I'm at almost half a quart here. You can see the line. You can see the line is about in the middle. It's in the safe range, and as you add the oil, it goes up, and then you stop pouring, it goes down a hair, pour some more, it goes up, stop pouring, goes down a hair. But it works out to about 3.5 quarts on this particular machine. Look in the owner's manual, it'll tell you where you need to be. So I'm going to fill it up to there. Now the problem is that it kept increasing, so I want something that I can kind of go by. So at that back line, you see it's an F and an L. So on the left side of the F, I'm just right at that line. So if it goes up or down from that, I'll be able to tell. And of course, you want to run it, warm the oil up, let it settle, and then check it for your final. But this is a good place to start. This is the catch basin that I drained the oil from. And as I said before, when I drained the oil, I thought that there was coolant in it because it was cloudy. As you can see, this is somewhat cloudy. It was really runny. I mean, it was runny like water. It wasn't thick like oil. So upon closer inspection and upon smelling it, I smell gasoline. So what this is it's engine oil, but it's been thinned by fuel. And as I said probably several times, the antifreeze is still full. So if the antifreeze is full and it smells like gas, then you know, how many fluids do you have that make their way through the engine? So here's what's going on. You have a cylinder here, and that cylinder, the piston rings and everything, some of those combustion gases go past the, basically I'm going to describe the PCV system for those of you who are like, where's he going with this? You have all these compression gases that get into the crankcase of the engine. And then you have a circulation system where you pump oil up through the head. Sometimes it's an external pipe, sometimes it'll be, you know, just a channel through the head gasket. There'll be a special round hole where it pumps the oil so that the oil circulates and lubricates the top end of the engine, top end, bottom end, camshaft, crankshaft. So what's going on here is we've got a bunch of fuel that's overflowing, leaking down in there, and it's also going past the piston rings, just like those compression gases do. We have a positive crankcase ventilation system so that all of those compression gases don't get out into the environment. We could have just like a reverse filter or something that just lets those gases out, but if we don't let them out, this would basically blow like a balloon. You know, there'd be too much pressure, we'd have oil leaks. There's no way you could get this to not leak oil. So we're leaking oil on the ground, compression gases are getting in the environment, all these bad things are happening, but what we do instead is we reroute those gases. We have a little escape hatch which would go to the environment and have the combustion gases get out, but that's what this is doing, is this positive pressure in here from those compression gases are being cycled up through the top here and then back into the intake and going back into the engine to the compression thing right back where they came from to be burned off in a clean way. So that's what's happening. Now when the oil level got too full because the gas diluted it and raised the level because there was so much of it in there, it was basically getting blown around, and especially at high RPMs where you have more compression gases, you know, more RPMs means more whatever it's going to do. So you have more gases getting in here. It caused a turbulence because it was thin, and the turbulence and being too high, the crankshaft is whipping it. Just like if you whip eggs, they get really frothy. So the crankshaft is whipping it because we're up into the crankshaft, our level's too high. So it's whipping it, you have a lot more gases, and then those gases are carrying that frothy mixture all the way up into here. It's going into the carburetor, and it's blocking stuff up, but mostly it's just flooding the engine with that frothy oil mixture. So that's what was happening. To prove that we're fixed, we're going to go ahead and run this now. I'll use my foot and we'll give a little throttle here. Come on, baby. Come on, baby. Alright, we're off to the races. We're up and running. So as we saw before, we have a lot less smoke, and that makes sense because if you're burning oil, you smoke a lot. So at this guy position here to where we can see evidence of anything going over, I'm going to let this run up, let the oil circulate, warm up, excuse me, and then I'm going to gas it, and I'm going to see if we can get any oil to puke out of here like we had before. It'll allow it to be revved when it's in neutral and cold and everything, but that was plenty enough to make it puke oil before. So we're still smoking significantly. We're still smoking significantly. This thing needs what we call an Italian tune-up. There's a method if you have spark plugs that are fouled, they've got too much fouling from excessive fuel, or in this case oil or whatever. And that is that you take the spark plug out and then you put a torch on it. You run the torch on that for a while, and what it does is it burns off all of that stuff that weren't burned off in the compression or the combustion process. There's a P and a C and something in there somewhere. I just made an alphabet soup of it as it came out of my mouth. Blah, verbal vomit. What this thing really needs by way of Italian tune-up is to just run it hot, you know, climb a hill with it, go fast with it, do something of that nature so that when we run the vehicle it gets hot in the combustion chamber and it burns all that crud off. Also, we're going to smoke it for a while because all that unburned oil and fuel and crap has coated, I mean really coated, the inside of the exhaust, not just the, so everything from basically in here is all coated in junk, but then your exhaust pipe out here is also coated in stuff. So this thing could use some inject water into it and run it through when it's hot and use that steam cleaning action to clean it out. A lot of people will use the old boat motor cleaner, whatever it's called, Seafoam, and they'll clean the thing out with that. But that's where we're at with this now. The carburetor needs to be clean because the float and stuff in here is getting stuck. You got your needle and seat. I think it's on the other side. We got these two little hoses that I wonder if they're blocked. Even this was blocked at the bottom, full of dirt and grass. This was used for landscaping at all the landscaping trailers, so you get all kinds of dirt and grass and all kinds of stuff that gets into it. But just need to run it pretty hard. That's the long and the short of it. To keep it from flooding in the meantime until I do the carburetor, I've been turning the gas to the off position. By doing that, I'm not adding more to the problem, and that way I don't lose $20 or whatever worth of oil that's down here. Let's see how it does now. There's still a little bit of smoke, but nothing like before. That's a lot better. Let's hit and rev it. There's still quite a bit of smoke, but there's a lot of crud that's going to be in the exhaust from before. I think we got it. So I'm up to operating temperature. Been cruising around the hills just a little bit, and you can see I'm a little ways from home. I anticipate reliability at this point. I just unwrap the engine. There's very little smoke on the throttle. There's just a little bit on the rebound coming off the pipe still. Yeah, still a little rich. Still have some carburetor issues to address, but for the most part we are asymptomatic and running great. So here's my drawing of what happened. It all started here with the needle and seat, or the float having a hole in it, and gas overflowing into the cylinder. From there, the gas went around the piston rings because there's a little slit. You know, you orient them to miss so that, you know, when it hits with force, combustion gases don't go around it. You can see this has a bunch go around it. This is out of a Subaru, but long story short, fuel pooled here, went around the piston rings, raised the level of the oil. The raised level of oil was into the crankshaft. You know, you see the connecting rod going around, and it basically whipped it like a blender until it was just a big frothy mess. So you got frothy oil, fuel, yuck all over through here. And then you have the combustion gases that slip around. That's why you have a PCV system, so that those gases can escape. When you rev the engine high, you have more gases get through, and so then that would shove the oil up into here. It filled up all of this little noise baffle or oil catch or whatever it's there for. So this got filled up. It was like your oil catch can on a turbo something or another. But oil would get through, and then it would cause the spark plug to get covered in oil and conk out. All the while, all this oil trail going through everything, coated the exhaust full of all kinds of film of oil. So when it heats up, it's like a smoke machine. It's just like if you were to take transmission fluid or something, you know, this thinned mixture, and put it onto an exhaust. You know, that's how they do the smoke screen is, you know, you just do some transmission fluid on it or a thin oil onto the exhaust and it just... So even with all of this fixed, we've got the oil level all back to where it's supposed to be. Everything's happy, it says full, it's just right at the bottom level below the crankshaft. That's why you don't overfill oil, as it gets whipped by the crankshaft and it loses the viscosity as it becomes frothy. So we've got all that done. We still have a little bit of smoke because this is all coated and stuff. It'll just take time to burn off, and especially at the muffler. The muffler has all of these baffles and sometimes they're full of fiberglass. You know, it's like a soaked rag of this stuff. So it'll take forever to get that to burn off. But once it does, we'll be good. But again, I still have to get in there and fix this. I just turn the fuel to off when it's not running, and that way it doesn't fill up full of gas. Riding it seems to keep up. It's not a real bad leak, so it might just be a needle and seat. They want 35 bucks for a needle and seat on this thing. I'm like, are you serious? I got a whole kit with the float, with everything that I need, jets, you name it, for the other four-wheeler for 35 bucks, but they want it just for the needle and seat, $35. Thanks, Arctic Cat. Awesome. So anyway, I shouldn't whine and complain. I should just be happy that I figured out what it is and that the parts are available. Because what if they weren't? That would not be cool. Supply and demand, right? So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll answer them the best I can when I can. And thanks for watching. This is kind of a fun little adventure of how the PCV system works, carburetors and, you know, stuck floats and all this kind of stuff, all playing together to create this concert mess of, whoa, what just happened there? So, cheers. See you on Wednesday. I left the key on. Remember the last time I did this? And of course I left the key on. That's dead. Son of a biscuit. Talk about obstacles.